Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're gonna continue building this Climber website. In the previous video we worked over the navigation menu that I'm showing right here. We were able to click home and go to home, shop and blog. We did all of this with the React Router DOM hooks. And the idea for today is to go from this to the second step, which would be to have the navigation bar properly aligned to the left here with the underline over the items, the header title in the center, and this hero image that I'm going to show how to add it to the React project and apply it with CSS. If you didn't watch that first video where we did the navigation menu and used React Router DOM, you can still follow along from this video, because I'm going to leave a link in the description for the version 1 of this code, as well as the link for version 2, that is what we're going to be coding in this video. Those two links will be pointing to CodeSandbox, where you have all this code available to experiment, change, do whatever you want to this code. And please, if you do like the idea of having this code available to you, don't forget to click that like button so that I know that I should continue posting the code for you. I think that's enough talking for now. Let's get right into the coding. I'm going to go to my second tab, which is going to be the link for the second version of this code. And I'm going to close the preview tab. As a quick review, I'm going to go back to our application as it is right now, and we just have a navigation menu that goes to the different routes that is being made with React Router DOM. And to show that, I'm going to go to the index.js file, and we can see here that all we need for React Router DOM is to import these three components, switch, route, and router, from React Router DOM. Once we have those components, we use router to wrap our application, and then we use switch as a children from app, and switch is gonna be switching over the different routes. And we have three routes. We have the base route that goes to home, we have a second route that is chop and goes to chop, and blog that goes to blog. All of those components, as you can see, are just inline functions. So functional components, but they are inline right here. I don't have them in another file yet. Now, if I quickly show the app.js file, we have the app component that receives children, which is that switch component from React Router DOM. And we present those children below the navbar, which means that the navbar will be present all the time, but the children is something that is going to be presented dynamically. Depending on which location the browser is at, we're going to present one component or the other. Now, the first thing that I want to show, if we go back to our application, is our rendered HTML. So let's go to the body of the app, and I am going to go searching in the root div, or the div with the ID root. That is where React lashes the components or the DOM elements. I'm going to open that. We have our app component, which is just a div with the class app. And we have our unordered list, that is the navbar component. And what I want to get your attention for is these default styles that are presented to us. We, in this UL, we didn't add those styles that we see there in the page, this yellow header and the green on the left, that is some padding. We can also see here that we have this 40 pixels of padding to the left and 16 pixels of margin on the top and on the bottom. That is not something that we want, and this comes from the user agent style sheet. So that's a default style that comes from the browser. We can see that the element that has been targeted is the UL, and for the UL element is adding all of these styles right from the browser. Right now, this might not seem as a problem because we don't have anything else yet. But if we wrap this navbar component with the header component, then this extra margin and this padding only to the left will start affecting us. So before that happens, let's see how we can address that. So back at the app.js file, which is our app component, we see on line 2 that we have an import for styles.js. There is where we are going to address this. I'm going to go to styles.js, and we have the styles for our app component. But before those styles, what I want to do is target my UL element and remove those default styles from it. And the way we would do that is UL and then open and close curly braces like any CSS style, because this is CSS. And I am gonna say margin 0 for every UL in the page, and also padding 0. So no margin or padding for any UL in our application. I'm gonna go back to our application, see how that looks. And right away, we see that we remove those styles from the nav menu. Let's just quickly go see from root, app, and that UL, it's clean. But I don't know if you already spotted this, and this is something that drove me crazy the first time I did an application. Apart from the UL styles that we already removed, there's something, and I want to show it, but if I go there, it disappears. There's something on the top before our UL and on the sides. Something is there that is creating that white space that I want to get rid of. So let's search for that. I am in my UL here. You can see where I'm pointing. I'll go to app. It's not there. I'm gonna go to root. It's not there. This non-script, not there. Body. Aha. There it is. So if I hover over body, we have, again, some styles that are put from the browser. I'm gonna click it and we can see the user agent, again, from the browser, is adding display block, which I don't mind, and there's margin 8 pixels on each side. That is something that I don't like. I did not put there, and I don't want that on the app. So the solution that we added for that UL is great for the UL, but I actually also want that everywhere. So how can we do that? This is something that you might already know. This might not be news for you, but we can add this wildcard selector. I can just add an asterisk, and that is going to be selecting any element in the page. So that goes for the HTML tag, for the body tag, for the divs, for the ULs, for the list items, for anything in the document. For anything in the DOM, I am going to be removing margin and padding. And then when we are in that component, we can add margin and padding as we please. Let's go see how that affected our application. I'm going to go to body, and perfect. We don't have any of that anymore. We can see that the user agent is still adding those styles, but we have crossed them because we overrode them with our selector here. One thing to keep in mind if you're following along is that this page sometimes gets disconnected from CodeSandbox. So when you make a change to the code, you might have to reload the page and you will see the change. Let's go back to our code for our next task. I'm gonna close the styles.css, gonna go back to app.js, and coming back to the elements that we are rendering in app.js, we have the navbar and the children, but in the design, we see that besides the navbar, we have a title in the center, and this is all aligned inside of the header. Right now, the next step is to create a header component, and that header component is gonna be responsible for rendering the navbar. So let's try to code that from the perspective of what we want first. I am gonna add a space here on the top, and I am gonna say that I want a component called header. And I'm just gonna comment that so that our application doesn't break, CodeSandbox doesn't break. I am now gonna go to the imports area, and I am gonna say that I want to import a header component from, and it should be at components/header/header. And I am also gonna comment that just because CodeSandbox might not keep up with the breaking changes. If you're running a Create React app locally, you might be able to do this and have the error, and then when the error gets corrected, then the app just works. But here it doesn't work the same because it's an online service. This header file, we actually do have it. We have it empty. If I go to components, I have a header folder, and the header folder has a header.js, but it's an empty file. That's something I did from the first video, just to save a little bit of time in the creation of files. Also in the previous video, what we did is copy paste the components. Here, I'm just gonna start writing the components so that we can practice this a little bit. So I'm gonna say import, and we have to import React with capital letters from React, that's lowercase. I'll create a constant called header, which is gonna be our functional component, an arrow function, which for now could render or return a header tag, because this is a header and we want our HTML to be semantic. I'll close the header, and I'm gonna add a piece of text inside that says I am header. Finally, we have to export this header, so I'm gonna say export default header. Now that we have a header component in place, I can go back to our app.js and remove the comment from header here, remove the comment from the component itself and go check it out in our application. And well, I noticed that the application didn't refresh. I tried refreshing the page and the web page completely stopped working. And for a moment, I thought that CodeSandbox was having a problem. But no, CodeSandbox is not that great at handling errors. This wouldn't be a problem if we were running the application locally, but here in the cloud, it is a problem. And so let's go back to the app and see what happened. You guys might have already noticed what is the problem. Here in the header component, I said that I was gonna render a header, but I meant a header tag, an HTML header. And instead of that, I actually did this with a capital H, which in React would mean that this is a React component, which is not. We are gonna export a React component from here, but this one is not a React component. So what we have to do is double click and then option, and then double click here. So I have both of them selected, the text for both, and I'm gonna remove the H and put a lowercase h on both. I'm gonna save that. And now if we go to the application, we can see I am header here. So it was not a problem with the page. It was an error in the code that just made this web page crash. Okay, let's continue. So now we are presenting the header and I'm gonna go to app.js. And the next step is to actually present the navbar inside of the header. So I'm gonna Command X to cut that, remove that line. And I am also gonna remove line 5 for that import of the navbar with Command Delete, so it's the whole line. And now go to the header component and I'm just gonna drop this navbar that I have on my clipboard right here. I saved it and that's why it jumped to this form now. And finally, I need to import that component, of course. So I'm gonna say import navbar from, and let's now remember that we are inside of a component. So I need to get out of the component, go to navbar, and then navbar again. Now if I inspect my elements, and let's do that with this icon right here, select an element of the page to inspect it. So I'm gonna select that. I'm gonna go here and see where that is. So this is the list item. And now they are inside of a header. So I have my app component, then the header component, and inside of the header component, I have my UL, which is the navbar. We are progressing slowly, but we are progressing. The next step is that title that we had in the design. Let me show that real quick. So this title right here, this Climber title that we have in the center. And for that, I'm gonna do something very simple. I'm not gonna create a component for that right now. I'm just gonna open an H3. I'm gonna say Climber, and I'm gonna close that H3. Let's save that and again go and see what's going on. And now we're closer to what we wanna show. Let's inspect this a little. Let me go to this Climber. So we have our H3 right there, our UL on top here, and they are all inside of the header. Now we have to take care of the format because we want the navbar to be to the left, the Climber to be in the center. And the way we're gonna do that is with the grid. If you have never used the grid before, it's a great tool to start working on that. I am actually gonna do it here in the console. I'm gonna slide this styles pane. And notice that I have the header tag selected. So that's why we're seeing the styles. If I select the UL, the styles change. So I'm gonna keep the header tag selected. And I'm gonna say that this header, I want it to be, and this is another trick. Let's say that I know that I want a grid, but I forgot how, like, what's the name for that? The grid, I know that's the value, but what was the key for that? So I can now in Chrome, there was a new version of Chrome a few months ago. So I can say grid, and I have a ton of options where grid exists. But if I actually go to the very end of the list, you guys can see that it also gives me options for the values. The key is called display grid. If I forgot, I just know that it's called grid, but I don't remember what the property is. Well, display, I'm gonna select that. And now I have display grid. Now I want to give the grid a format. And again, I don't remember. I remember something about columns, but I don't remember what the property was. So let me just write column. And let's search here, and this one, grid template columns. That was the one that I wanted. So let's add that one. And now with grid template columns, you will specify how many columns you want for your grid and the value or the size for those columns. So let's start by specifying one, and this is called 1FR. So those are frames. You can say 1 pixel if you want, or you can say 1 rem if you want. So let's go back to FR, and I'm not sure if I said frame or fragment, but FR is a fractional unit. That's what it stands for. Now if I hover over header, we can see that there's like a pointed line there. That is my grid. So one fragment doesn't do anything for us at the moment. Let me go back there, and I am gonna add a second fragment. So I'm saying that I want 2 columns, 1 fragment. Now that I have 2 fragments, I can go back and hover over the header, and now we can see that there are 2 columns. In one we have the navigation menu, and in another we have the title. So this is kind of working, but we want the title to be in the center. So what we can do is specify 3 columns, and that way the navbar will be on the left, climber on the center, and the third column would be empty. Fantastic, there we have it. So we have 3 columns and we have the format that we were looking for. Of course, I did this in the styles pane, and this is not gonna stay in our application. So I can copy this, go back to our code, go to the header styles.js, and we have an empty file. I'm just gonna give a little bit of space here. I'm gonna paste those styles, and I'm gonna just put them as a comment. And here we could easily go to one of the other styles files and just copy the styles so that we have the format. But instead of that, again, it's good to at the beginning practice, and I want to show again how that styles hook works if you were not here for the previous video. So let's do that. I will start by importing the make styles function from add material UI styles, which is already here. Then I'm gonna give a little bit of space, and I'm gonna say export default make styles, and make styles is a function which we will run, and it accepts an object which we will pass. And as a convention that I've been using, I usually give the name of the component, so header, and then if this is gonna be the style for the main, let's say that this is the header tag, but because this is the root of the component, I will call her header root. That will be the name of the first property. I'll open an object for that, and now we can add our styles. I am just gonna select it. I'm gonna use one of my favorite shortcuts, which is Option and then up, and then Command/ to remove the comment. Now we just have to fix this a little because this is plain CSS, and here in this file we're not talking about CSS, this is a JavaScript object. So these semicolons are not right, they should be commas. The values for the properties should be strings, and finally properties with dashes, so capital T here, and remove C dash capital C, so grid template columns. Now that we have created our styles, let's go to the header component, and we need to import those. So import use styles from header.styles. So again, very quickly, we will be exporting the default value of make styles. So this function returns a hook, which we are receiving right here, use styles. And now we are gonna use that hook in the function. I'm gonna say const classes equals use styles. So the use styles hook will shoot a property called classes that we're gonna pass to our header tag in class name, classes, and we can see the option here, header root, so it knows the properties that these classes have. Once we have saved that and we go to our app, perfect. Everything is in place and exactly how we wanted. Now there should just be a height in this header that we don't have, so let's do that. I'll go back to the styles and all the way to the end here, comma, height, and we can pass a number that will be interpreted as pixels. That gives the proper height that we chose for our header. But to be fair, I have this page on +200 so that you guys can see. But in reality, we're following the design. The next thing that we want is these items to be centered. And that is also another one of those properties from Grid. I will add a comma here, and then I will say align items. And it should be string that says center. It's already looking better. If I hover over header, we have our columns with a little bit of padding and that they are centered and all of that. So I think it's time to move on to something a little bit more interesting. So why don't we take care of the hero image that we have in the design? So this guy right here. And for that, we will have to go all the way back to index.js. I will close all the other files that we don't need, just leave index.js. And that first route that we are rendering is home, which, like I mentioned before, is just an inline function or inline component. So we will have to create a component for home now that we are gonna make these changes. And let's revert the process. Instead of coding for what we want or need, I'm just gonna go ahead to the home component or home.js file, and I'm just gonna start creating this component. So import React from React const home. That is an arrow function. And we'll return what it returns right now, which is just a React fragment that says home. And export default home. Now that we have that file in place, let's go to index all the way to the top and import home from components home. Now I'm just gonna pass home to our first route. And let's just make sure that everything is running like it should. I'm gonna go to our navbar, click chop, blog, home, and yes, all the functionality is still there, great. To work on that hero image that we want to have in the page, first we need to have the image in the project. So let's go to the code. And in another window, I have my Finder open where I have my hero climber PNG. I hope you can see that right now. I'm dragging it with my mouse. And we need to have this image in the public folder. So I'm just gonna drop it right there. And now we have this uploading icon. And now we have the hero climber image in our project. And the way we're gonna add this hero image to our project in terms of the actual page is gonna be through CSS. We want to add the image to our home component. And since we want to add it through CSS, we need to import our styles, which are empty at the moment. Let's go through the process of adding styles here. So again, I'm going to say import make styles from add material UI-styles. Export default make styles, which again is a function that accepts an object, and I will call the key home root. And guys, it's amazing how simple it is to add a hero image like this. We will add a property called background image, specify a URL with a string, so URL as a function, and just add the name of the image, so hero climber.png. There are a few other styles that we need for the image to look the way that we want, but this is actually all you have to do to include the image. Now let's go to home.js. We will have to make that import for the styles. So import use styles from home styles. Go to our component and add const classes equals use styles. This is our use styles hook again. And now we have to return something more logical. So home is not ideal. Let's remove that. And the HTML tag that we will be using is section as a self-closing tag. And it's a self-closing tag because I'm not gonna add any text or content inside of the section. So it has no children. And now I'll just add the classes that we created with class name, and then classes.home root. If we go to our code, we can say, hey, the image is not there. What happened? And well, let's just inspect this. So we have our header and Below that we have our section, and if we see in the styles pane, we actually do have that background image with the hero climber. So the image is there. The only thing is that, like I mentioned, there are some other styles that we need for the image to be the way that we want it to be. Let's add a height to the element. So height, and I'm gonna set something like 10 pixels. And there it is, the image is right there. The only thing is that we specified that we wanted an image called heroclimber.png that is in our public folder, but we didn't say how big or how low it should be. Right now I'm just doing up arrow on my keyboard to make the image bigger. So that's all we need, a few styles. Let's go back to our styles file. And I know from my design the height that I want for this image. So I'm just gonna say height 648 pixels, and another property called background size. So background size of cover. Let's see how that looks. This looks way more like we want, but I want to bring your attention to one detail here. When the browser or the device that the person is using has different widths and heights, we still want to show the same part of the image. So that is another property that we are gonna add. This one is pretty important, and that is the background position. So background position to be button. We are saying that we want our image to be anchored to the bottom. And it's a little difficult to show this, maybe because of the zoom that we have it at 200. Let me try do a little less zoom to see if I can show that behavior. I'll try changing the size of the browser. And yeah, actually here we can see the difference. We see that even when the image moves from the height, the image somehow remains with the person anchored to the bottom. So that's what that does, and it's something that we need, because if not, someone might move the browser and then the thing that is in focus will disappear. You can change that property to be from bottom, I think there's top, and if you are curious about the different things that it could be, we can just go to the styles pane and check the property right here. So we have button. I'm going to remove the bottom property, and we have all the options. So it could be bottom, it could be center, it could be left, it could be revert, which I don't know what that does, right, top, etc. So in this case, we want bottom because the person is in the bottom, but maybe you have a sun, or maybe there's the sea or something pretty in the picture that you want to have. Maybe it's on the left, so you want that to stay in the frame. So you just need to choose whatever is right for your image. I'll make the browser full size again. Another thing that you might be wondering, and this is one of the nice things of the dev tools, is why did we add this background size cover? I didn't talk about that. So we know what the background image is the hero image. Then the background position bottom, we talked that we want this guy to be on the bottom. And the height, of course, we know what that is. But what is this cover? So here in the DevTools, I can remove styles. So if I remove the height, we know it disappears. If I remove the background image, of course it disappears. If I change or remove the bottom, you guys can see that it changed because now it's doing something different. But if I remove the background size cover, then what happens? What happens is that the image starts repeating. You can see here at the very end how the image wants to start again. So it just starts going on a loop, depending on the size of the image and how wide your browser is, etc. So that's why we do background size covers, so that it is just the whole size of the container, in this case the section that we're putting the image in. Guys, if you're liking this video, don't forget to give a like. That really helps this video and the channel, so it would be highly appreciated. Let's continue. And the last thing that we have pending for now is to add the underline over the nav items. And that is also going to be a nice little thing, because we are going to use what it's called a pseudo element. So those are elements that are not really elements, but they exist before and after an element. And that's what we're going to do. Let's go to the nav item styles.js. And we have our base styles for the element as well as a selected style. We need to leverage this selected style because when it's selected is when we want to show that underline. And the solution that I'm going to show is not the best, and you guys will see and notice why. Maybe later I can do a more proper solution. I have one of those slider underlines, which is pretty cool, but it would take us a little longer, and it has JavaScript. So I'm just going to do this quick and dirty for now. Let me know in the comments below if you do want that JavaScript underline sliding thing, and I would gladly create a video for that. For now, what I'm gonna do is Shift Option down, and that copies the entire selection that I had, and just need to add a comma here so this doesn't cry. And now the fun part. So I mentioned that the elements have an after or before, and that is called a pseudo element. To be able to target a pseudo element, we have to add a colon and then after. Now, if you already know about this, you might say, hey, why not 2 colons? Why is not 2 colons? And we will actually leave it like that. But there's one tiny detail with this, and is that if we use 2 colons, Internet Explorer is not able to recognize that. So if you do this, it works in every browser, but if you do 2, you will have maybe Chrome and Firefox and some others working, and Internet Explorer wouldn't work, which is a very common thing. Internet Explorer does stay behind, so let's not care about it and just leave 2 of those. And before I start adding the styles for that, let me just show you really quick. I'm gonna here go back to 200 so you can see the page better, and I'm gonna make DevTools a little wider. Let's click this icon so I can inspect, and I'm gonna go to one of the items, and let's just look out here, the UL and the list items. We have a list item li, and that's it. There's nothing before it, there's nothing after it, and that's the only thing I wanted to show, and it has the selected class. The other ones don't have that. Let's go to the code and start changing some of those styles. And I wanted to show that because I am already targeting that after pseudo element. Why are we not seeing it? I actually have a color there. And the reason is that to be able to show a pseudo element, you need to have some content in it. So I can say content, and you can specify empty content, but in any way you need to have content. If not, it will not appear. So in React, this is kind of weird because since it's not JavaScript, we need to pass a string, and the string needs to have an empty string and things like that. So it should be like this, like I'm showing you. And I don't just want to do that. I want to actually do my nasty trick and add a few underscores. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then I'm gonna say that I want this to be color black. We need a comma. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so we have the underline, but in a very awkward and horrible place. And now let's take a look at the actual item. So if I go see this list item, well, it actually doesn't appear before or after here. But if I open the list item, we can see that we have an after element here that didn't exist before. You can see the other list items, they don't have that. You cannot open them, they don't have children. Well, they have children, this shop thing, but there's nothing else than that. And this one does have the pseudo element that if I click, we see the styles right here. And now, like we did before, we can play with the styles right here in DevTools just to see how things change. And then when we have the thing that we actually want, we can just move it to the code. I mean, it's just a way to do it. So I'm gonna say position absolute. And we can see that that already moved this a little bit. Now chop is on top of it. Now it's very important to know how the position absolute works. With position absolute, we can change the coordinates of where the element appears. So for instance, if I say left here and I type 0 pixels, we see that the underline moved, but it went 0 pixels from the left side on the browser. So how does that work? Also, if I come here and I type top 0 pixels, then the underline went really high here. Let me try to inspect that. And actually, you can see that it's the whole square. The underline doesn't seem to be all the way to the top, but that's because it is inside of a container. And all of this is happening because this element that I am saying position absolute is being absolute to something. It has a position absolute in relationship to another element. So let me put in the screen what the MDN docs say, and I highlighted the part where I want to bring your attention to. So the top, right, bottom, and left properties specify offsets from the edges of the elements containing block. So that is the in relationship to what? Well, in relationship to the containing block. And then in parentheses it says the containing block is the ancestor relative to which the element is positioned. So that's why we are seeing that when we say position absolute with left 0 and top 0, this goes all the way to the left because we didn't specify who is the ancestor element that is gonna be relative to. Let's try to do that also here in the styles pane. This is the after element, and I would like it to be positioned absolute in relationship to the LI because that is the containing box that I want for it. So I'm gonna click the LI and I'm gonna go to this element style and I will say position. And here we have all the options: absolute, fixed, relative. That's what the one that I want. And see what happened. Now the underline is way better positioned. It is 0 pixels to the left of the containing LI and 0 to the top to the same containing LI. Now all we would have to do is to play with these values a little, so not 0 pixels because there's some padding. And this is the part where I would say that this is a nasty trick. So instead of 0 pixels, I'm just gonna use my keyboard and I'm moving that so that is kind of centered, but it's gonna be centered with home. It's not exactly gonna be centered with shop and blog. And now that I have that, I can play a little with the top and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks good. And now we have our underline position where we want it. Let's grab all of these styles, copy them over to our code, remembering that we also need to make that element relative. So I'm gonna go here to the end of this, I got a comma, my styles, and I will do some quick fixing here. And with that in place, I'll add the position relative to the list item itself. Position relative. Let's go to the app and test the functionality of this. So if I go to shop and then to blog and back to home, there we have our underline working. The next thing that I would do for this web page is on this design, go to shop and start making this product images, but that is something for the next video. So if you're liking this content, don't forget to click the like button, and if you don't want to miss the next episode where we will build the shop, then consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching and see you next time.